comments that are going to be read in public comments.
All right.
So Corbin's going to do a quick audio test just for a minute to be careful with your audio. You can talk, but just know that it's going to be live for just a minute.
Hi, Dan. You look puzzled.
Hi.
They're scrutinizing how we look and whatever.
I'm just trying to wrap up my work day.
Video works, whatever.
Hi, everyone. This is Jocelyn.
Hello, Jocelyn.
Hi.
Hi, Jocelyn.
Hey there.
Also known as Loner.
Also known as who?
Loner.
Loner. We're all loners.
Devin, okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Raul.
If you can rename Loner to something else.
Right. Especially since we're stuck in our houses alone.
I actually don't think I can change her name.
Maybe Dave can help me with that. Dave Marquedo.
Well, I don't understand, Jocelyn. How are you calling in?
I'm not. I clicked the link you very kindly provided.
I think it's because the PC laptop.
Are we on?
Yes.
Good evening. This is the Select Board meeting for Tuesday, March 31st, 2020. Before we begin, I'm required to announce that all Select Board members are participating in this meeting remotely using the WebEx platform. That includes Mr. Franco, Ms. Heller, Ms. Hamilton, Mr. Fernandez, and me, Bernard Green. I'd also like to use this opportunity again to urge our community to continue on the course we have begun to get the coronavirus under control. We are being told that the peak of the virus may hit the Boston area mid-April, so that what we do now will have a major influence on how hard that peak hits us. So as we have said before, it should be repeated, please stay in your home as much as possible and find things to do to keep yourself sane. For example, virtual cocktail parties or virtual museum visits with friends. Continue aggressive social distancing. 6 feet is believed to be the range of most coughs that can spread coronavirus droplets. 6 feet should be your minimum if you have to be outside among other people. Continue rigorous hygiene practices, including washing your hands frequently with soap and water and using hand sanitizer when soap and water is not available. If you go out for sunshine and to maintain your health and sanity, be alert to your surroundings. Following these simple guidelines are not too burdensome. It will help keep you and the people around you and our community healthy and safe. So with that, announcements and updates from the Select Board. Does anyone have announcements they'd like to make at this time of upcoming events?
I would like to speak about, we're trying to put together a Houses of Worship virtual town meeting. More to come on that, but I'm reaching out along with the Brookline Police Department, who has been in contact with a lot of these places to try to schedule something for early next week.
Great, thank you.
I would like to talk about the Census Complete Count Committee, which Raul and I are co-chairing. We have meetings on Monday mornings from 8 to wherever we finish, usually around 9, between 9 and 10. We have people are working in different areas to try to inform our Brookline residents about the importance of the census. For those who have not heard, the census date has been pushed back now. I think it's all the way in August at this point. So we do have more time. I think that's partly in order for the census workers who go out and knock on people's doors when they haven't responded to keep them safe by not sending them out right now. So people should understand that anyone who lives in Brookline, doesn't matter if your citizenship or where you're from or anything, whether you're undocumented or whether you're not, nothing matters. That your privacy is protected, it's safe. It's very important that we count everyone because so much depends on it for the town, including federal and state dollars, but also the number of Congress people we have in the House of Representatives. You know, it's really, and it only happens once every 10 years. So let's hope that we can all do it. You can do it online, or there are numbers that you can call. My census2020.gov, I think, is the address. And you can call to give your information over the phone. It's done in several languages as well. So, you know, we hopefully that everyone will do it. And be sure to count everyone in your household. Believe it or not, the experts estimate that many babies don't get counted. But people don't forget about the fact that they had a baby the week before and or whenever, and don't count them. So they count too. Everyone counts, from the very young to the very old. So Please remember to fill out your census form.
Okay, any other announcements of upcoming events?
Well, I wanted, go ahead, Raul, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to update the board about the virtual town meeting committee or working group that I'm this body's representative on. The group met for the first time just over a week ago for about an hour and a half, and we spent our time trying to develop a list of criteria that needs to be accomplished or accommodated for the virtual town meeting that'll presumably be held in May or June of this year. We're set to meet again to continue that conversation on Monday, April 6th. At 7:30 p.m. And information about that meeting will be posted on the town's calendar for anybody that wants to participate. Obviously, it's going to be held online using WebEx, as all town meetings are using at this point in time.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fernandez, did you have something you wanted to add in terms of the update of upcoming meetings?
Absolutely. I've got a couple, actually. We are continuing our weekly series for small businesses and nonprofits here in Brookline of virtual town halls. So this is now our third weekly, happening this Thursday from 9 a.m. to, we keep saying till 10, but we keep going till 10:30. So you can expect that we'll probably do that again, including because we have, once again, we had him join us at our first meeting. We have Congressman Joe Kennedy joining us again. As you know, there was some recent legislation passed and signed, which is called the CARES Act. And he's going to be explaining a little bit about what was in there relevant to small businesses in particular, and answering some questions as well. So I hope you'll join us for the entirety of that meeting. Once again, it's this Thursday from 9 to 10:30. And all of the information, I'm going to ask that this information end up on our COVID website as well. I think for all these virtual town halls that are related, we should probably have a space there where people can easily find them, because there's all the calendar with all the other information going on there too. I want to mention one more, and this is related to a statement that we'll be adopting today, I think, related to support for the Asian community in Brookline. We are having on Friday a virtual town hall with Brookline's Asian American Family Network. It's going to be at 2:30 p.m. on Friday. And we're actually going to be discussing some of these issues related to racism and xenophobia, directed toward the Asian community in the wake of or in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, but also how that's actually part of, this is not new, the type of racism and xenophobia that Asian people face. We'll be discussing that as well. We've got a presentation from UMass Boston professor and Brookline resident Andrew Leung, and we'll also be taking comments and questions from folks that would like to. So once again, we'll make sure we get this information out through the COVID website so everybody can see it. We'll share this information widely. One last thing before I forget, Brookline Interactive Group is also, they have a survey right now where they're trying to get as much information as possible about what residents need right now in terms of what information they want coming through BIG to them. So if you go to their website, brooklineinteractive.org, right at the very top there, you'll see a link to a survey. Kathy Bisbee and the amazing team at Brookline Interactive Group that have kept us going, kept us live this whole time. They'd love to get feedback on exactly what it is that you, the residents of Brookline, want to see coming out of BIG through this time. So encourage you to go to the website, brooklineinteractive.org, and complete that survey. Thanks.
Okay, Ms. Heller, would you like to tell us or tell the audience about your efforts to collect personal protective equipment for doctors and first responders?
Definitely. So a couple of weeks ago, my daughter, who is a physician at the Beth Israel, was upset about the fact that there was not enough PPEs, that is medical supplies, masks, gloves, etc. So we decided to do an effort to collect these things, not only from small medical practices and dental practices, which are not using them because they're not open as much anymore, but also from individuals. And so we originally posted the email on the TMMA list, and with the help of John Bassett, jotted on the Brookline Neighborhood Alliance list, as well as the different lists that are associated with that. People have picked it up and sent it on to others. Tommy Vitolo has sent it out to his email list. And I've actually been talking with Dave Cavell about that same strategy. We've collected quite a bit of material. We've taken it to hospitals. I've also giving it to individual physicians if they ask, because some of the packages are opened and the hospitals prefer to have closed packages, but physicians in the community feel that they need it, or nurses, or any person who's involved in, first responders, anyone who's involved in the health of our community and our residents are welcome to them. So it's going well, and I'm hoping that more people will donate, because this is how we're going to get through this very trying time of not having enough equipment. Obviously, people don't have ventilators, which is something also that's very much needed, but at least we can get the masks and the gloves that they need. And people are also donating surgical covers that people wear and that type of thing. So it's been gratifying, and I'm thankful to everyone who has donated, and just ask you to keep them coming.
Thank you. Ms. Hamilton, would you like to report on the town hall meetings addressing available resources and services that could be used to mitigate the impact of the coronavirus on our citizens?
Sure. Thank you. Last Wednesday, we had a virtual town hall that convened about 20 different organizations throughout Brookline that are doing some sort of effort around, the COVID-19 response, including the Brookline Community Foundation that is doing the Safety Net Fund, which I can't stress enough. If you want to donate, that is one of the preferred options, because it can serve a lot of people who will find themselves in need. We are culminating a list of the people who are on the call from those organizations, and we will be making it available, I believe, this Thursday. It will be posted on BIG's website as well as the town's own website. So a whole list of the organizations and contacts that participated on that call for anyone who is interested.
Thank you. Any other announcements or updates or reports of events that board members would like to present? No? Okay, let's move on to public comment. So we're asking people to submit their public comments to the select board to be read by town staff, because we're not yet able to have people make their comments through our web portal or WebEx portal without difficulties as we've had in the past. Hopefully, we will be ready for more direct interaction with viewers in the near-term future. I am told that we're looking to be able to do that beginning next meeting. So, Mr. Kleckner, do you have comments that have come in that someone can read?
We did have a request from Deborah Brown, who wanted to speak at public comment about the Alston appeal, the civil service appeal. And unfortunately, I think there was some miscommunication, and she did not submit her comments in writing, thinking that she would be able to participate directly. But as you mentioned, we're not going to be able to do that until next week. So I will just acknowledge that Ms. Brown did want to speak about the Alston appeal. The next one I have is a public comment from Megan Levine, who is a town meeting member in Precinct 3 and also a candidate for re-election, and wanted to talk about the election. I'll read her statement as follows. I appreciate the opportunity to submit public comment and respectfully ask you to postpone the Brookline town election. Number one, while democracy is important, we need to put the health of all of our residents above everything else. We cannot ask local residents to gather for a local election in May. We must postpone the election. Number two, if Brookline is considering a 100% mail-in ballot election, something that would be new to our town, it's important. It's important to provide sufficient time for the town staff to coordinate the effort and enough time to publicize the change to all town residents. This Wednesday will be April 1st, which doesn't leave enough time to roll out this new election format before the original May election date. We must postpone the election. Number three, both of my parents are over 70 and live in New York City. They have not left their apartment for the last few weeks. I worry about them every day. I could not ask them to leave their apartment to find a mailbox to vote. This is what I think about when I consider asking many of my neighbors to leave their houses in order to exercise their civic right. We must postpone the election. Number four, we still don't know whether the virus can be transferred via objects like mail. Until we have a better understanding of this risk factor, we must postpone the election. I urge the Brookline Select Board to put public health before elections. We must postpone the election. And again, that was from Megan Levine. The next comment is from Lee Birnbaum. Mr. Birnbaum resides on Ferndale Street. Amid the vast decrease in automobile travel and significant increase in people trying to use the sidewalks for exercise, some outdoor time, and non-transit, non-car access to essential services, it seems we have a bit of an imbalance in the demand for sidewalk versus road space. During this time of social distancing, would it be possible to A, turn over some of the parking areas, lanes of our major streets to people on foot, people in wheelchairs, people on bicycles, scooters, etc., who are looking to responsibly run essential errands or get exercise while also allowing them the necessary 6-foot distance from others? B, close some streets to cars other than local access so that they may be used in their entirety for outdoor recreational use with sufficient social distancing. C, perhaps more speculative, close off a portion of some large parking lots in town for similar uses. For example, the TJ Maxx parking lot has a lot of excess capacity at the moment that could easily be used by families with younger children looking to bike, scoot, etc., while maintaining sufficient space from other families and spreading out demand away from the limited paths inside parks. I think we have lots of people in this town who want to respect the recommended social distancing guidelines while keeping themselves and their families healthy, but that can be difficult with the current allocation of space along our public ways. To the degree we can help them with cones and tape or other barriers during this time of severely reduced car traffic, I think it would be of great help. Again, that was from Lee Birnbaum. And then one additional public comment from Amanda Zimmerman. Amanda says, I don't know if this is part of your COVID-19 discussion, but I think we should be making more room for pedestrians and bicyclists to appropriately social distance. Walking down Harvard Street yesterday, while most people were trying to give each other space, the sidewalks are simply not wide enough to allow for 6 feet between people. The same is true on Beacon Street. We have to assume that people will need to go outside during these crises and facilitate safer ways to do so. I suggest donating 1 lane of traffic in each direction on Beacon Street to pedestrians and cyclists and parking from one side of the street along Harvard. Alternatively, we could look at closing down an entire street of traffic to pedestrians, runners, and bikers. Either way, we should be doing what we can to facilitate people properly social distancing. And that was it. We did have a lot of comments about construction, not necessarily part of the public comment. So I have an update on that. I can do that whenever you want, Mr. Chair. I can do it during now or later during our COVID-19 discussion. But that's the extent of our public comment this evening.
Well, it's scheduled for the later discussion. Why don't we just continue to do it that way? I'd like to suggest to Ms. Brown that she submit her prepare a statement and submit it to us for the record, or speak next week when we hopefully will be able to take public comment. The Alston matter was something that this board voted in October of 2019, and nothing significant has happened recently in regards to that, partially because of the coronavirus impact on the courts. I believe that we did file a brief recently. That is just a formality, or not a formality, but that's just a regular step in the process. So next, miscellaneous items. Question of approving order number 2 in connection with PW 19-22 feasibility study for the Davis Path footbridge in the amount of $16,100 with Lee Rowe Engineers. Collector, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Fairly straightforward. Any questions from the board? No? I move approval of change order number 2 in connection with the feasibility study of the Davis Path footbridge in the amount of $16,100 with Lee Rowe Engineers. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton? Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, question of approving the March 17, 2020 virtual town hall minutes and the March 24, 2020 select board meeting minutes. Any questions or edits to that, to those 2 minutes? No? I move approval of the March 17, 2020 virtual town hall minutes and the March 24, 2020 select board meeting minutes. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, our calendar. Authorization to hire recreation. Question of authorization to hire a golf general manager / head professional for the recreation department. Mr. Fleckner, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, it may seem odd to be doing that at this time, but at some point the golf course will reopen, and it's a critical time as the weather gets better that we have somebody in place to manage the property. By the way, the property is being used for passive recreation currently. No golf is allowed, but the community is allowed to walk and run through the property as similar to any other park. But I'd like to move forward to hire this essential position at this time. And as you know, this is a revolving fund, so or I should say an enterprise fund. So there are no town tax funds that are going to this, and I'd like to do that at this time. And Ms. Jackson is here if there's any questions I can answer.
Any questions from the board? Okay. I move approval of the authorization to hire a golf general manager / head professional for the recreation department. All in favor, Mr. Franco? Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. I can see people mouthing aye, but sometimes the sound doesn't come over. Next, lodging house license. Question of approving the application of Sana Perry for a change of lodging house agent for Pine Street Inn, 1017 Beacon Street. Anything to add to that, Mr. Kleckner?
No, I believe you were aware that last week we dealt with the other Pine Street property, and this is the second
Right.
of those 2 properties.
Any questions from the board? Yeah, I move approval of I move approval of the application of Sana Perry for a change of lodging house agent for Pine Street Inn, 1017 Beacon Street. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, annual town election. Discussion and possible vote to postpone and or modify the annual town election. Mr. Kleckner, you want to lead us through this discussion? I see everyone has his memo.
Everybody's in their apartments.
March 27th.
Yes, I will. And Jocelyn Murphy, our town council, and also Laura Goldberg, special counsel from KP Law, and Linda Goldberg, assistant town clerk, are participating as well. So we had this discussion last week, and it's clearly staff's recommendation that the election be postponed. For, I think, obvious reasons, especially if we're about to aggressively look to do an absentee ballot type of an election. At this current time, that's total absentee ballot election is not allowed, or at least we have to keep open the polls in the event people want to come to vote. So we have recommended, I've recommended, with the concurrence of the town clerk, the assistant town clerk, that the election be postponed until Tuesday, June 9, and that's about roughly 4.5 weeks after the original date of May 5th. This will, I believe, allow us more time to prepare. I think it will allow the health crisis to abate, hopefully, to some extent. And we will be able to run a more orderly election. The town meeting is also being postponed. That's the town moderator's decision. And so that will be postponed after this election. So the same sequence will take place that was originally scheduled, town election, and then a couple weeks later, the town meeting. So we think that's very important. And we would absolutely request your approval of that this evening. The other issues we're going to talk about a little bit is whether or not the town will, this board will seek a special act of the legislature to allow us to go even further than what the current emergency legislation allows, which is an all ballot election or all digital election. I will say, I think Lauren Goldberg is prepared to comment on this, that I think it's unlikely the legislature will take that up, given the fact that they feel that they've already done, I think, enough for the town elections. But also, I think there are some policy issues that that we have to worry about, people without internet access and others who might not, for whatever reason, be able to participate in the, be aware of the absentee balloting. Anyway, at this point, I'd ask you, Mr. Chair, do you want to take a vote on the postponement, or do you want to talk about some of these other issues?
Well, if the board members have any questions or comments, I'll start off by saying I think that we can. It will be very difficult to do a partial mail-in election, but with an opportunity for people to drop off or vote in person at maybe 1 or 2 polling places. That's possible. It's going to be very, very difficult, and we're going to have to really focus on the safety measures, assuming that, and I think we should assume that this virus situation will be in full bloom even in June. So, any other thoughts or comments? None?
I'll go. I just want to make sure everyone who's watching right now understands that at this point, according to the current legislation, that we are required to hold an in-person election between, the date that we had scheduled, May 5th, and June 30th. June 30th is the absolute latest that we can hold an election at this point. I know we got a lot of feedback from people in the community saying that the election should be postponed much further, even till September. According to the current legislation, we have to have this election and have polls open, sometime before or on June 30th. I'm one of those folks that was really, campaigning and doing everything we could to hold our May 5th date. I think that postponements of election should happen in only the rarest of circumstances, and that we should do everything we can to make sure that we hold free and fair elections on the date in which they've been scheduled. With all that said, based on everything that we know today about the capacity of our town clerk's office, about the changes that we are pushing for in terms of getting more and more people. I hope everyone, to the extent that we can get everyone to submit an absentee ballot, I think would be ideal, so that we don't have people congregating in polling places, not to mention the health and safety of our polling workers. With all that said, I think it is the right call now to move this back just about a little over a month, to be able to give our town clerk's office the amount of time that's necessary to do something that hasn't been done before, at least not here, which is to prepare to receive a significant number more mail-in ballots and absentee ballots than they ever have before. We've got to figure out a plan to do that, to do it safely, and that's going to take some time. I also, as we prepare and they prepare for this election, that we'll have to still include polling places being open. We think about what makes sense to meet the demand that we'll still probably have on that day, to make sure that especially people with disabilities have access to be able to vote. And that's something that I know we received some feedback on in terms of an all-mail election. With that said, I'm very excited about the prospect of us proactively sending ballots with return stamps on them to all registered voters, so that we can not just encourage absentee ballot, mail-in balloting, but actually give them the resources to do it. So I hope that's going to be the final result when all is said and done of our discussion today.
So I just want to amplify something that Raul just said, that COVID-19 is an acceptable reason to request an absentee ballot. Right now, there's 3 very specific reasons, and the Secretary of State, the chief election officer for the entire Commonwealth, has gone on record saying that COVID-19 is a legitimate reason to vote absentee. So nobody should feel any pressure to turn up in person for fear that they don't qualify for an absentee ballot. I also want to echo something that Select Person Fernandez said around interest and enthusiasm around exploring an all mail-in election. And I acknowledge and realize that it's unlikely that the legislature is going to take favorable action on any special legislation that we submit to hold this Cummings June's election as an all mail-in election. But I still support filing the legislation for 2 reasons. One, it signals in a very public and proactive way the town's interest in further exploring this concept for future elections, those beyond June of 2020. And secondly, it gets a request in the hopper should we find ourselves in a sticky situation in June and there needs to be some additional steps taken to protect public health beyond the normal social distancing and sanitation, sterilization and sanitation of pens and the like. So I think just to, if only for safety, an additional measure of safety, it's worthy of filing that special act. And again, to signal our interest in pursuing this for future elections.
Yeah, I'd like to second Mr. Franco's comment about the need to get the idea of a mail-in or absentee election in the hopper for consideration, not just because of the upcoming elections here in town or statewide, but because of the November election. I think it's very important that we have a system at least ready or ready to be used in November, when my guess is either the current wave or a new wave of this virus will still be impacting us, and it'll be before the time that a vaccine is available to allow a complete return to normal in the country. So if we can be an example for the country of how even under these conditions we can hold an election, we can maintain democracy, then I think we ought to do it. That would be important.
I'd like to comment on this initiative. And I'm certainly not opposed to it, although I do think it's rash to do it for this particular election because it's so soon and we don't have the systems in place. We don't to make sure that everyone who wants to vote can vote. How are they going to get notice? We don't know we haven't solved the problem of people with disabilities. And that may even continue in an all ballot election. And we may need to have some provision for a polling place, people who are visually impaired, who live alone, would certainly have a hard time filling out a ballot. So, and as well as others. So it may be much easier for them to come to a polling place and participate in that way. So I would not want to cut anyone off. And I would, even if we got, we cut our polling places to 3 or 4, just so that those people in different parts of town could congregate, assuming we don't have 6-foot distancing and COVID pandemic before us. I think it would be a much better thing. If other states have done it, then we should be able to do it too, but we need to understand what it entails. We need to understand how to prevent fraud, how to and how to verify the ballot that each person is submitting. So there are measures in place to do that now with the current system we have. And so until we figure out how to do it more broadly, we need to stick with what we've got. And I agree. I'm happy to go with the idea that we'll submit legislation for the future, but I don't think we're ready for it now.
So I have a question. I guess I'm confused why we're holding the date on the 9th as opposed to, I guess, the 2nd, which would be almost exactly 4 weeks from the prior date.
Impossible.
More time to
We need more time. Yeah.
to figure out how to do this.
We would like to have as much time as possible without getting too close to the town meeting. I understand the town meeting is tentatively scheduled to take place on the 23rd, so this gives 2 weeks, and we would not like anything less than that if possible.
It may also be that the town clerk's office will need time to recruit new poll workers. There may be an exodus of current ones who don't want to, for the most part, are older Americans and don't want to come out of isolation at that point. We don't know. We just don't know. So the longer we wait, the better off we are.
Okay.
I know it's not a pretty sight, and I know no one likes it, but I think no one likes being isolated either.
What is the benefit of June 2? Is there anything in particular that we wanted to do it sooner than June 9?
Well, I think there were a few people that were just nervous about the in-between time between the election results and then the orientation for new town meeting members. It's just, it's not a lot of time once the election happens going into town meeting.
Yeah, I was one of those folks who expressed some concern about the gap between the election and town meeting. To Select Person Hamilton's point, we're using, this is going to be a virtual town meeting. We're going to use an online platform, and it's going to require some degree of training for town meeting members who have varying levels of technology skills. Those who are adept and use video conferencing platforms regularly in their day jobs, their professional life, and those who maybe are getting on for the first time. And I think the more time we have to train people and give them some experience with the voting procedure and how to speak and mute and unmute themselves and get them familiar with being on camera, the better. I respect the point that this is a new thing for the town to hold an election in an era of a pandemic, and it's a balancing act. But I think there's pushes in both directions to hold it as late as possible, but also to provide ourselves adequate time to provide the training to town meeting members and frankly set ourselves up for success in a smooth and effective and efficient town meeting.
Okay, any other comments, any other thoughts or questions? So, Mr. Kleckner, I assume that we should vote the motion in the memo that you circulated?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I move that in accordance with emergency measures enacted under Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020, The Select Board does hereby postpone the annual town election scheduled on Tuesday, May 5, 2020 to Tuesday, June 9, 2020. The board encourages staff to widely advertise the postponed election and take efforts to protect the public health and safety of the public and election staff by aggressively promoting absentee balloting and taking other measures to mitigate the health risks for those voting in person. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So,
Um,
pardon
I
me?
was gonna say, before we move on from the election, I was hoping, can we confirm and affirm that, or is this something that we still need to figure out whether or not we'll be able to proactively send out ballots to all registered voters?
Well, so we're not moving on from the election. We still have to talk about the possibility of a special election, but I think that that question is appropriate at this point. As far as I know, we're not limited to promoting absentee balloting, including the mailing of ballots. But we have our council as well as Ms. Goldberg on the line if they have anything to say about that.
Hi, this is Jocelyn speaking. The legislation certainly supports and encourages both absentee voting and early voting. I think what has to happen at this point is the town clerk's office really needs to, now that a date has been set, really needs to set to work to figure out how they're going to handle the tsunami of mail that they can expect. So I think the answer, Mr. Fernandez, is we can certainly do that. Question is how and when to do it so that it's most efficient and takes both staff and the public's health and safety into consideration.
Could I just make a comment? I think the process of absentee balloting is one of currently is of a resident requesting an application to file an absentee ballot and mailing that in, and then the ballot gets mailed out. And I think part of the reason for that is to reduce the risk of fraud and to understand who on the voting list is going to be, submitting a ballot. If the person makes an application and the clerk determines for what reason, some people fall off the rolls, and there are various reasons for that, then at least the clerk has time to inform people that they're not registered currently. And, I don't know what the procedure would be for getting them registered, but that's a very legitimate thing. If you mail a ballot to somebody without any request, you're going to get back some ballots. People think that they're going to be legitimate, but they won't be, and it'll be too late for them to actually act on them. So I think that the current procedure in place is a good one, but obviously with time it may change, but I'm not sure that it should change for this particular election.
You, Nancy.
Pardon me?
This is Linda Goldberg. I'd like to make a comment about that.
Yes, go ahead.
Presently, to send out an absentee ballot, we need a resident voter must submit an absentee ballot request. They can either do it by mailing in a request. I do think that we can do it by having them request a ballot online, but there's a tracking process, which is very important to maintain the validity of voting. And I mean, tracking ballots and then counting ballots are two of the most important things that we can do in that respect. So mailing out a blanket absentee ballots to everyone is not something that we can do right now. Is Lauren on the line at all?
I want to make sure that when we talk about, I see Lauren there, but I want to make sure when we talk about what we can do, that we separate out what is practical to do versus what we literally have the power and what this board can vote to do, and make sure that we think about those as two very different things. It may be that if something's not practical to do, that this board wouldn't vote for it, but I just want to make sure we get the language right.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So, Linda, as the assistant town clerk described, right now, in order for any person to vote,
Could you talk directly into your microphone?
Yes.
We can't hear you. Devin?
Better?
No. We see you, but we don't hear you.
Find your microphone on your computer and talk directly into it.
So straight.
There might be a delay.
No, you still can't hear me?
Faintly.
Really weird. I'll call back on my phone, just 1 second, and then you'll be able to hear me.
I think you're fine, Lauren, now.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. So what I was going to say is that under state law, in order for a person to be provided with either an absentee ballot or an early voting ballot, they have to make the request. And that request can be on any form of communication as long as there's a signature that goes with it. So there's absentee ballot applications and early voting applications online. And then you can take a picture of your signature and send it. And the reason, as Linda indicated, is because you need to have the signature match the name on the voter registration list. So under state law, you're not prohibited from sending applications to everyone or from sending notice to everyone saying you can request an absentee ballot or an early voting ballot. You could describe right in there about how the rules relative to absentee balloting have been changed by the provisions of Chapter 45 of the Acts of 2020, and also that early voting is specially authorized for this upcoming election. And I do believe that this will accomplish many of the things that you had hoped for in a special act to deal with all mail vote by ballot. And I'll tell you that I did some research, obviously, after last week, and the comments that you all made. And what I found is that even in the all vote by mail elections, there are still what they call voting centers where people can vote in person. So you're really never going to eliminate having a polling place. In addition, though, and I think this is really important, is that in most of these circumstances, there's statewide legislation that authorizes the local vote by mail only. Massachusetts doesn't have that yet. I think it's been pointed out that it's highly likely that we're going to be looking at some changes, especially if COVID-19 doesn't, if we're not able to flatten the curve. But for now, I do believe that it would be very difficult to get special legislation passed. I did have informal discussions with the elections division, and they, indicated unofficially, of course, that they thought that would also be relatively difficult. There's logistical and planning issues that I think in this time of social distancing and working from home, it would be very difficult to come up with a workable plan. However, the current legislation allows anyone who wants to vote absentee, to vote with a mail-in ballot. And so if this board chooses, they could provide that notice be sent to everyone, which would encourage absentee balloting and encourage early voting. And as I believe it was the town administrator who said, in the meantime, the town clerk's office is going to have to figure out how to handle all of the ballots, because they are counted by people, meaning the ballot envelopes are put into machines that read what people have voted. And so that will still happen. Secrecy of the ballot will still happen. So in order to count all of those, they'll need to have a plan. Also, I do think it's worth mentioning that the action the board took tonight, to me, seems very consistent with the action the governor took earlier today. He pushed the date for non-essential businesses to return to work till May 4th. And although we know the clerk's office is essential in every way, having a fully staffed office, or at least a partially staffed office, will be impossible before then. So I think allowing, however long you're able to get the word out to people to vote by absentee, as well as for the clerk's office to prepare, will bring the result you're looking for without changing state law at this time.
Okay. I take it you're not saying that we should not submit the legislation, even knowing that it's unlikely to pass. I think the select board has stated that they would like to put a flag out in the field that says that this is where we want to be heading towards, especially with the November election coming up.
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't presume to tell the board what to do, but I do believe that I still think, even if we're looking at a president and the Speaker of the House indicating that this is the board's position, that it would be better for voter turnout, but also being cognizant of the fact that we do want people to be able to vote in person if they need to, and also, as Selectman Howard pointed out earlier, that we'll need to address people with disabilities to make sure that we're providing options. I, as I said, I did speak with the elections division, and we kind of charted out all of the major issues that you would need to address. I think it's a substantial piece of work to come up with a workable special act that addresses all the things that you would need it to. And again, I mean, certainly town council can work on that. And I'm happy to assist, but I think getting into the format that would actually need to get passed is a bigger job than one might otherwise think.
We're not hearing you.
Yeah.
Repeat what you said after bigger job.
A bigger job than one might otherwise think.
I'll just note that in this scenario, if our efforts to encourage absentee balloting are highly successful, then that means we are going to need to deal with a flood of absentee ballot requests, as well as the actual ballots themselves. In a scenario where we simply send the ballots to registered voters, we're only receiving the flood of actual ballots.
Mr. Chair, I take no issue with that, and I completely understand. There isn't an ability right now, though, to send the ballots without the application. And the way our elections kind of system is developed is that it is triggered by the voter, and the Board of Registrars, when they get an application in, they have to compare it, the name on the signature to the name that they have. And so there's no mechanism for us to just, without anyone asking for it, send it out. And that's really what I was talking about when I was saying that getting that whole kind of big picture statutory scheme enacted will be required to deal with the risk of fraud and the risk of of people being disfranchised by accident. For example, if someone moves, or if we think we sent a ballot to someone and they don't get it, if a ballot's returned because it's undeliverable, all of those things need to have a statutory resolution. So right now, the way the law and the regulations are written, it allows the clerk's office to respond on a one by one basis. If everyone votes by absentee ballot, I think we'll learn a lot of good lessons about how to do this better in the future, because it will lead to, I believe, a more focused effort on vote by mail. I'm happy to provide you with some resources if you'd like, so you can look through them, have a better idea of kind of all of the different pieces. Obviously, I believe in elections, and so I just like you, hope that everyone who is able to participate gets to, and that's the board's goal from the start. I understand.
Those resources would be great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate your analysis too. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Kleckner, what is the next thing we have to vote on?
Well, if you want to, staff and to submit a special act or through the governor, I guess, you have to advise us of that. I don't think we're going to do it without your direction. So I think that's the next vote that would be up.
So, Mr. Kleckner, Mr. Green, this is Jocelyn speaking. I just wonder, I'd be very interested in Attorney Goldberg's opinion about this. But I wonder if the time would be better. This is really a statewide issue, isn't it? Particularly as regards November. And as Attorney Goldberg pointed out in her memo, there are maybe 5 states that have statewide manuals and protocols for running mail elections. So if it's a statewide issue, why would it be our resources be better served by reaching out to the Secretary of State and the governor, as Lauren suggested, and essentially asking the state to do something that's statewide?
Okay, what do people, select board members think?
I think that's probably wise. I doubt that they would allow, I just don't think it's going to be something which Brookline is allowed to do and nobody else. So I think in this effort, we might also acquire some partners, if you will, in other municipalities to support this. And I think that would be a valuable thing.
Yeah, I can go along with that. My concern is just making it clear to the state that we can't assume that elections can be held in the normal way with a few changes around the edge.
Maybe this board needs to submit a letter to both the governor and the Secretary of State, the House Majority Leader and the Senate Leader, about, as well as our own representatives about this. We might also want to publicize it on mass municipal resources, and also through the metro mayors, through the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, etc. So I think that's the way we get other communities on board, and that's, I think, the way we would be more successful in coming up with a system that relies more heavily on absentee and vote by mail.
So let me make 3 points, and I'll just say that I still support us submitting special legislation to apply just to Brookline, and here are the 3 reasons why. 1, submitting special legislation and having it filed in the Great and General Court is a very public way of voting, indicating support, which isn't the case with a letter sent to the Senate President, the Speaker, the Governor, or the Secretary of State. 2, frequently when you're looking to change law, it's the first person to put their foot out and propose for it that's the most difficult. And we very well might open up a flood of proposals that are in the same vein as what we're looking to do. And 3, it's a well-worn path to get statewide action taken to have a number of local municipalities seek approval to do something. And the legislature effectively says, gosh, we've gotten the same request from 300 cities and towns, we better do something statewide, and they consolidate all the legislation together and come up with a statewide solution.
So let me build off of what Ben was just saying. This reminds me of the transfer tax discussion that was starting to mature at the end of last summer and into the town meeting that we had in the fall. It just took one community to put their foot out, as Ben was just saying. So I think that we should go ahead and request, special legislation. I think that that will be the domino that topples some of the other dominoes.
Okay, any other comments? And the only downside is, as I understand Jocelyn saying, it's distracting time and energy from other efforts. and the amount of time that would be required by special counsel as well as town council to put together the legislation and any ancillary documents.
And
Mr. Chair.
I would add the cost of that too. I mean,
Right, the cost of that is going.
I don't know what that would be. Maybe Mr. Kleckner has an idea, or Jocelyn.
Well, I believe we included in the packet some costs for an aggressive election, not necessarily absentee election, but not necessarily a total one. But I don't think it'd be a whole lot more than that. But I reserve my right to check on that. I think the only point I'd like to make is, I respect whatever position the board wants to take. I just would hate to give the Brookline voters the expectation, the understanding that we're going to have this election on June 9, because I don't think it's going to happen. I don't disagree with all your points about trying to advance the policy, but I just hope that people aren't expecting it, because I think it is a long shot.
So just to clarify, we are having an election on June 9th. It may not be by mail, but there will be an election on June 9th.
Yeah.
There is an election.
And everything we say should say that it more than likely will be some combination of absentee and mail-in and in-person voting. I mean,
I hope so.
Okay, let's see, who hasn't spoken on this issue? Pardon? Sure.
Given that we are going to have an election on June 9th, and this issue is one that is going to come up in the fall, is going to be discussed by the legislature, most likely not too soon. Perhaps we would be, there's no reason we can't submit it next week or the week after, or even May 1st or 2nd or whatever, or even June 9th. And I seriously doubt anything would happen before then, given everything that is going on in terms of the pandemic. And it might be more noticeable if we submit it later than earlier.
Submit legislation later than earlier.
Correct. Request for a home rule.
Fernandez, what are your thoughts? You haven't spoken on this issue.
I associate myself with Mr. Franco and Ms. Hamilton's comments, and I'd like to also request that we file the special legislation for Brookline.
Okay. Well, it looks like 3 at least select board members are for submitting the legislation. I guess we need a vote on that. I move approval of. Hello? I move that we approve the submission of special legislation to the legislature to permit the town of Brookline to hold an all-male MAIL election at period. Any questions, corrections to that? All in favor?
I'll just comment that I'm going to vote against this only because I'm worried about the resources. I'm worried about the staff resources of town council's office. And I'm worried about, what will happen to it. I think it will just sort of die its own death because there's so much else going on. So I'm going to vote no. Want to make it clear that I'm not opposed to an all mail-in election, but I think it has to be crafted carefully and with the support of the
No, of course. And yeah, my thought is that I think Mr. Frankel said we just want to make sure that this is out there as the discussion of how to deal with upcoming elections is carried out. So, all in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
No.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. Any other town election matters we need to take up?
I don't think so. Anything, Linda, that you want to add?
No, not at this time.
And let me just say that, Linda, whatever, speaking for myself, whatever resources you need, whatever support you need in order to pull off whatever type of election we have, I think this select board is committed to providing them to you. We know it's going to be a very difficult process under any circumstances, but you have our support in whatever way is necessary. This is an important thing for us to do, have an election. That's what democracy is all about. And we need to do whatever it takes to be able to continue this democracy, which is in a fairly precarious state right now. So that's my view.
I'd like to just add two things. One is that we are the largest town as far as voters go in the state right now. Most towns have many, many less people as registered voters. Right now we have 38,929 registered voters. 9,000 of those are inactive, and that means that those voters require there are special requirements for them. They have to show an ID, etc., or present an ID somehow or other, whether it's in person or online, etc. We have a very small staff. We have 3 full-time people at present and 1 part-time person besides me. We are going to need more people to help us. And, it's going to take a bit to figure out how we're going to do this. But mostly most important was we have to maintain the integrity of our elections, and tracking the ballots and counting the ballots are the 2 things that are really important. So I just want to put that out there. And we can use all the help that we can get to make this work as a really good election that provides the ability for everybody that wants to vote. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Linda. That's my commitment as well, Mr. Chair, to the town clerk's office.
Great.
Can I just ask a clarifying question on the topic of the town election? It's my understanding that those who have turned in their nomination papers and are qualified to appear on the ballot will continue to be qualified and will appear on the June 9th ballot as they would have on the May 5th ballot. So nothing has changed about the candidates or those who will appear on the ballot. It's only the date of the election that has been changed.
Are you asking me?
Well, town council, yes.
I'm sorry, this is Lauren. I was just going to jump in to say the deadlines and dates for filing, et cetera, have not been changed. The election has essentially been put on pause. And when, about 20 days before the election is when it would be unpaused and things would kind of continue with gusto.
So I just think that's an important message for all those who are running for election or interested in following town government, that nothing has changed except the date of the election. If you turned in nomination papers previously and qualified to be on the ballot, then you're all set. Same list of candidates, different date when votes will be cast and counted.
All right. Thank you.
And while we're clarifying, I don't know if this may have been said today. I know it was last week. That those with this change in date to June 9th, those currently in office can hold their positions until June 9th now. Correct me if at any point I'm wrong, Lauren, Jocelyn, or anyone else, but can hold those positions. That means we will be blessed with Mr. Franco's presence, hopefully, unless he skips town on May 5th. We'll be blessed with his presence up until June 9th, and I believe that goes for all other positions, but if you can help clarify that'd be great.
This is Jocelyn. That is accurate.
Great. Maybe we should move the election to a later date in June just to keep Ben Franco on this board. Sorry, Ben.
I'll vote for that.
Okay. Anything else on the election? Let's move on to other business involving COVID-19 mitigation. I think under this topic, Mr. Fernandez should present his statement that he's asking the board to vote on. Do you want to start off with that?
Happy to do that. Just pulling it up right now. So just a little bit of background for folks who weren't with us last week and in previous weeks. We've had, select board members in the past make comments about this at the select board meeting and outside of select board meeting. In fact, a few of us actually, before it was unsafe to do so, spent some time supporting Asian American businesses in Brookline at an event hosted by JALSA and in coordination with the Brookline Asian American Family Network. So this board, as individuals and even collectively, has spoken a lot about the need to support our Asian community in a time where there's been a rise in racist and xenophobic remarks and actions that have been chronicled in locally as well as in national publications like the New York Times. With that said, folks have asked the board, and I think rightfully so, to prepare a statement that all these comments that we've made, including last week, every single board member denounce those racist and xenophobic acts. But for us to put a statement out, so if anyone is wondering where the town of Brookline stands on this, we can all point to that statement. Had an opportunity to share this with one of the leaders of the Brookline Asian American Family Network, as well as the chair of the Commission for Diversity and Inclusion and Community Relations, in addition to all the board members that are here with us today. So I'll go ahead and read that statement, and hopefully we can all affirm that statement. So this is the Select Board statement on supporting our Asian community. Many residents have asked the Select Board to respond to the recent racist and xenophobic acts directed at the Asian community in Brookline and beyond. These bigoted acts, driven by fear and ignorance, have been well chronicled in the news media and in firsthand reports from our own community members. While the spread of COVID-19 may be the excuse given for this abhorrent behavior, we know well that racism and xenophobia toward the Asian community has existed long before this crisis. We also know that this stigma has been historically reinforced by government actions like the Chinese Exclusion Act, the internment of Japanese American citizens during World War II, and the forced placement of Asian children into segregated schools. It is because racism and xenophobia toward Asians has such deep roots that we must be even more vigilant in calling it out, alongside anti-Semitism, homophobia, and other forms of hate. While each member of our board has spoken out individually about this, we want to be clear that we stand united in denouncing these racist and xenophobic acts, as well as the many individual and governmental acts perpetrated against Asians throughout our country's history. We'd like to thank Brookline's Asian American Family Network and our Commission for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations for their advocacy on this issue. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be hosting a virtual town hall with Brookline's Asian American Family Network on Friday, April 3rd at 2:30 p.m. to discuss these issues. And we encourage residents of all backgrounds to participate. You can join us on Zoom to ask questions, watch on Brookline Interactive Group TV on Comcast or RCN, and you can also watch the live stream at brooklineinteractive.org/live. COVID-19 is a threat to everyone. Our ability to get through this crisis depends on all of us in Brookline working together. We hope you'll join us in actively speaking out against any racist or xenophobic comments you may hear and supporting our Asian community, particularly our small businesses, in every way that you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding the statement? Okay, I move approval of the statement prepared by Mr. Fernandez. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. I'd like to sort of add to that, not to the statement, but just make a comment that it's important that we also make the point that because your group is not under fire does not mean that you should not be concerned about these racist attacks against the Asian community. As I've always said, for example, when the president and before law enforcement officers on Long Island a couple of years ago used the phrase "paddy wagon," in front of police officers, many of whom were Irish background. That hatred against Black people, which he was expressing in his comments, also was connected to the type of racist comments vis-a-vis Irish that were expressed in his use of that term. So I would say, that we also should be aware that racism and discrimination is indivisible. Today it's going to be the Chinese, or other Asian communities. Tomorrow it may be the Italian community, because Italy is where the COVID virus is really spreading fast. Who's next? There's no one safe from indivisible hatred and racism. If you think you are, read your history. So that's my thoughts on this. So next, Mr. Kleckner, you're going to discuss COVID-19 mitigation efforts of the town.
Yes, and particularly I'd like to raise the issue that's in your packet about funding for what's referred to as the safety net. So just a little bit of background. This community has for a long time helped the people less fortunate than themselves, and the Community Foundation has established a safety net fund. It's been in place for many years. The recent iteration of it includes the management by the Brookline Center for Mental Health, which provides that key component of referrals and other services to people who may also be looking for financial assistance. So the Safety Net Fund is established. It's a great vehicle to support the Brookline community, but it needs funding, obviously, during this crisis. I don't know if you've seen the kind of numbers that have been produced in terms of unemployment, but it's staggering. And I think it's going to be felt in Brookline for some time. And so the idea, I think, is for the town to support the Brookline Community Foundation Safety Net Fund. I know, I believe a select board member has already mentioned that as the town's official charity for this particular pandemic. But the other part is, in addition to supporting it, which the town certainly does, and will make efforts to do that, we've explored where, if anywhere, we could allocate some town funding to support the safety net fund. And we've identified two areas in particular. These are both special funds of the town. The first is our community development block grant allocation. We are an entitlement community and receive direct HUD funding from the federal government. Doesn't go through the state, comes right directly from the federal government, and it's intended to support low and moderate income persons. So this is clearly an eligible activity. And we have been able to cobble together some funds that are available. We do program all of our CDBG funds in the beginning of the year, but for some reasons, various reasons, there are some accumulated balances that are not expended. And we've identified up to $75,000 that would be available from CDBG at this time to support the safety net. We're a little concerned that the rules with CDBG aren't very flexible. And so by doing this, we might have gotten above a certain cap within the grant for public services. But as I understand, recent federal legislation, I think it was referred to before as the CARES Act, has resolved those issues. And so we have a little bit more to do, but I think the board is ready to take a vote tonight to allocate up to $75,000 from CDBG to the Brookline Community Foundation Safety Net Fund with some conditions. And Mr. Viola from the Planning Department is here to talk about those. The other fund is our housing fund. We have a housing fund that is funded through a number of different ways, including from developers who are trying to meet the town's inclusionary zoning bylaw. In this case, we believe there's $100,000 that the Housing Advisory Board is prepared to make available It does require the Habs vote, and they haven't met yet. But I think in the spirit of trying to signal to the community this evening that the town itself is prepared to put up its own money for this very worthy fund, that we vote for that as well with some conditions. So with that, I can ask Joe Viola to talk about specific votes, or just the board can have some dialogue if you'd like. How would you like to proceed, Mr. Chair?
Bernard, you muted.
You're muted, Bernard. So can you just start from the beginning?
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to hear from Mr. Viola.
Good evening, all. I am on the call. I'm not going to attempt to put my video on. I'm having some technical difficulties. Hopefully, you can all hear me.
Yes.
So essentially, as the town administrator noted, we were able to identify some funds that would be able to be reprogrammed to the Brookline Safety Net program. At this point, we are trying to do our best to follow along with what HUD's requirements would be, especially as directed through the CARES Act. One of the requirements that we normally have when we're redirecting funding is to advertise and have a public hearing. And normally we have to make a substantial amendment available to the public for review, and then we have a public hearing at which citizens are able to provide public feedback about the reprogramming of those funds. Under the CARES Act, we're able to cut that 30-day public comment period down to 5 days. We're not absolved from doing public outreach. We have to advertise the availability of a substantial amendment, and we have to come before the board to seek approval for that substantial amendment, along with a contract for your review and approval that we're working on currently with the Brookline Community Foundation. We've had some preliminary discussions about what kind of scope of work that they would undertake using federal funds, and subject to a vote of the HAB, perhaps how they would utilize the town's housing trust funds. So we anticipate bringing before you that substantial amendment, a contract for your review and approval. But the first hurdle, I would say, is that we need to advertise the substantial amendment and set up a meeting whereby for the public to provide you comment, if any.
Okay, and this is an amendment of the grant agreement, CDBG grant agreement.
It would be an amendment of our fiscal year 19 annual action plan. And the amendment would state something to the effect of unexpended or uncommitted funds are being redirected to fund the Brookline Community Foundation Safety Net program.
Okay.
This would all be in a package for your review and approval. We're currently working on that now, and as well as determining the first date we could get a legal ad and other methods of public notice completed that would allow us to reprogram that funding.
I'm sorry, I missed it. What is the date that you're able to get the legal ad?
We're thinking that we're currently exploring the Boston Globe to see if they're able to they're able to expedite our legal ad requirement. We're thinking the soonest we could get a legal ad posted would be next Thursday.
And
we're probably working on a 2-week. I'm sorry.
So did you say 5 days after that is when you'll take public comment? What was the next step?
After the ad has been posted, we would appear before the board for that public comment. Correct. And it would have to be, I need to clarify this. I don't know if the weekend, usually 5 calendar days count toward the public notice phase, and I'm imagining that's how it will proceed, but I want to verify that.
Okay. Any questions?
I'm sorry. Could I just note that
Sure.
we're actually having a meeting with HUD on Friday for them to provide us more guidance, not only for process of reallocating existing funding, but also for, as the board may know, we're subject to we're likely to receive additional funding as part of the CARES Act through, it'll be treated as supplemental block grant dollars. We'll also have to program that money at some point. So we may be before you for more than one action for multiple pots of money. Just trying to get that up front now.
Good. Any questions from the board?
I just wanted to offer some context here. This is huge. Right now, we're talking about the town making an initial investment of $175,000 between up to $75,000 from CDBG funds, as well as the $100,000 that we're hoping the HAB will approve tomorrow. Normally, they would approve it and then us, but we're conditionally approving it hopefully tonight. This is huge, and so is the need. And I think to Mr. Viola's comments, there's more resources coming as a result of this legislation that just passed, and there's more need coming as well. So anything that we can do to expedite these funds getting to where they need to be, I hope that we'll all support. I just want to give some again context on the Brookline Community Foundation Safety Net Fund, which is administered by the Brookline Center. They support anyone in need who lives, works, or goes to school in Brookline. It is a whole community approach. And that means that included as part of that, and they provide support for rent, utilities, food, and other acute financial needs, the basics, the things that we all need to survive, right? And included as part of this, business owners in Brookline are included as part of this. Employees in Brookline are included as part of this. Not only that, but also MECO families who go to school in Brookline are included as part of this. And as many people know, those stimulus checks that are going out and unemployment insurance, the folks who are undocumented, who work in many of our restaurants and other businesses where we love to eat and patronize, those folks won't be getting these monies. It's important to know that this fund is also available to anyone regardless of documentation status. This fund is huge. Unlike other communities that are trying to create a brand new fund, this already existed. Brookline was already doing this work for the people who need it the most. And not only that, but because it's run through the Brookline Community Foundation, they work in tandem with the Brookline Food Pantry. I mentioned the Brookline Center already. Many of the other aid organizations that were on that call that Select Board Member Hamilton hosted the other day, they already work in tandem with these organizations. They really have their finger on the pulse of what's needed here in Brookline and are ready to provide, what people who need the most actually need in Brookline. So I'm excited about us making this this commitment to that fund, and not only us making this commitment to that fund, but encouraging other people to give to this fund and to continue to support all the other worthy groups that are out there right now. But this fund in particular, we've heard from Ian Lang at the Brookline Center and Frank Steinfeld at the Brookline Community Foundation that the need is growing day by day. The curve that you see out there as we talk about the coronavirus, we see the same curve growing and growing with the need, and we need to actually do what we can as a community to meet that need. I'm excited that the Select Board and Mel as our town administrator and all the town staff like Joe Viola and others that worked on this, really excited, and thank you for all the work on this. And to the Housing Advisory Board members who are meeting tomorrow, I'm excited for what they're about to do too, because the need is great, and I think it's terrific that we're working as a community to meet that need. So thank you all.
I'll just add that I hope this is a public-private partnership. We as a community are stepping up and devoting substantial resources to providing assistance to the entire community, to Select Person Fernandez's comments. But we're looking and in fact inviting others, both individuals and from businesses that are doing well, to step up and supplement, enhance, and amplify the work that we're doing, both as municipal leaders and individuals. So please join the party. The water's nice and warm.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Franco that in addition, this is a credible, legitimate fund in times of crisis of any sort. Bad actors appear to try to rip people off and take advantage of their desire to help people in their community. But we can tell people that the Brookline Community Fund, which has been around for a while, is a really transparent and legitimate fund, is where they can give the bulk of their money, in addition to contributions to smaller organizations throughout our community. The public-private piece is very important. Brookline is a very wealthy community in many respects, not in all, but in many respects it is. And we hope that those people who have the means take advantage of the opportunity to make significant contributions to the Brookline Community Foundation. So, any other questions, comments? Okay, I move.
We have two proposed votes. Do you have those, Mr. Chair?
Yep,
In front of you?
I have them.
Sorry.
Okay.
Very good.
First, I move that the Select Board approve the expenditure of up to $75,000 in fiscal year 2019 unexpended community development block grant funds to the Brookline Community Foundation's Safety Net Fund, subject to meeting the requirements set forth in the CARES Act, a recently passed CARES Act. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Next, I vote approval that the Brookline Select Board approves a Housing Trust Fund contribution to the Brookline Community Foundation Safety Net Fund in the amount of $100,000 to increase the Brookline Community Foundation Fund's ability to meet housing-related needs of households impacted by the current public health crisis, contingent on the Housing Advisory Board's recommendation, which is anticipated to occur on April 1st, 2020. All in favor, Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton?
Aye.
I'm sorry, Ms. Heller?
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton now.
Aye.
Mr. Fernandez?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay.
And if somebody needs to avail themselves of these resources, maybe Select Person Fernandez or Select Person Hamilton can help us understand where they need to go and who to reach out to.
Right. There is a phone number that folks can call. So that number is, I'll read it twice. That is 617-277-8107. Again, that's 617-277-8107. And they actually have folks who are well-trained and work with people in multiple languages. So please don't let that be a deterrence to calling. They do speak in multiple languages. You can find more information on the Brookline Center website, which I should have had up, but I don't. It's brooklinecenter.org. So once again, brooklinecenter.org. Please check it out. Thank you.
Okay, I assume that we're going to put that up on our website and a link to the foundation.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Kleckner, you're going to present your update of the construction situation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the balance of the meeting, under this item, we're going to be talking about some of the activity that's going on in our community, how it relates to the governor's ban and what we are doing, and also a couple other things. But the first and the most, I think, significant issue in the community is about construction activity. And so I have a little statement I want to read, and then happy to open it up for questions. Dan Bennett, our building commissioner, is on the meeting as well. So as I reported to the board last week, the governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has issued an executive order that list essential services that may continue during the public health emergency. The governor's order explicitly allows all types of construction. He has confirmed in subsequent communications that this was an intentional decision and that he is not reconsidering it at this time. He especially emphasized housing construction as essential. Cities and towns may not take action to limit the governor's authority. However, the governor's order does require that work sites practice social distancing and other protocols consistent with guidelines issued by the Department of Public Health. And in accordance with this requirement, our building commissioner has issued his own COVID-19 guidelines and procedures for all construction sites and workers. The Commissioner of Public Works has issued similar guidance for roadway and utility projects that are underway in Brookline. The town has issued a request for a voluntary construction concern. There are several construction projects underway in Brookline. The major ones receiving the commissioner's attention, including the Brookline High School project along Cypress and Tappan Streets, the Hancock Village project in South Brookline, and the hotel project at 700 Brookline Avenue. Roadway construction includes the State Gateway East project along Washington Street and Route 9, as well as several smaller construction sites for town roadway safety projects and National Grid natural gas work. With regard to building projects, the town's building inspectors frequently visit construction sites at least 3 times per day on a random schedule to observe and provide guidance on social distancing practices. Each project has submitted and is implementing a safety plan in accordance with the state and local guidelines. For Hancock Village, the work primarily consists of blasting of ledge and other site work. Both the town's independent blasting consultant and fire department personnel are on site during all blasting activities. Vibration and noise monitoring is ongoing and to date has not exceeded the limitations imposed by the blasting plan or the town's noise bylaw. However, we are requiring additional noise monitoring to be placed near occupied buildings on the property. As you may be aware, Chestnut Hill Realty, who is the owner of Hancock Village, has voluntarily agreed to suspend construction activities on the weekend and will not commence construction prior to 8 a.m. or blasting prior to 9 a.m. I am advised today that CHR, Chestnut Hill Realty, has just agreed to extend the construction start time until 8:30 a.m. If the board has any questions or concerns, the building commissioner, Dan Bennett, and I are available to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions from select board members?
I'll simply say that I wish the governor hadn't been so prescriptive about what we as municipal officials are allowed to do in terms of construction. But I certainly feel like the governor's made that decision, and I'm not going to step in and knowingly violate the governor's order and do something that I know is not permitted by moving to shut down large residential construction projects or large necessary infrastructure projects.
I'll also say that I know that there's an effort by a number of town meeting members to write a letter to Chestnut Hill Realty expressing their concern. We have the voluntary ban, but because the governor issued his order at this time, there's not much that we can do as a select board.
Any other comments?
I would agree with that. We don't like it, but I think what we need to do is do as much enforcement of the 6-foot distancing. And Mr. Kleckner has indicated that that's going on in the building department several times a day, surprise visits, so that we know what's happening. And I think that that's really important. And it's important for people in the community to know what we're doing that as well.
Yeah, I would add that the governor's order prohibits us from stopping construction, but does not preclude us from enforcing mitigation practices at construction sites, which we are doing. And that's really going to be important in terms of reducing both the risk to the workers as well as risk to the community in which the work is being undertaken, as well as workers' families when they go back home. So yes, we are constrained by the governor's order to some degree, but we're not constrained by or prevented from taking robust steps to ensure that any work that is performed at the highest level of safety possible.
So we've got a number of 40B projects in town, and I'm wondering if what we're able to do, the type of oversight that Select Person Green just spoke to, differs between those projects that have a comprehensive permit, a 40B project, versus a 40A project, a normal construction project.
Good question.
Is
Mr. Bennett?
Could you repeat that question?
So the question was, are we able to exercise greater oversight over 40A projects than we are over 40B projects, just given the nature of the comprehensive permit which the Zoning Board of Appeals issued?
I don't think so. At this point, they're all past the 40B part. They've applied for permits under the state building code, and that's all equal at that point. We do have special, conditions that come through on a 40B that aren't on 40A, but I'm not hearing any more or less complaints on a 40B site versus a 40A site. 134 Babcock, I think, is the 40B site that's ongoing now. They have sent me their plan at 420 Harvard and 455 Harvard. They're essentially finished and have temporary certificates of occupancy, so there's no real issues on those sites. So at this point, I don't think a 40B versus a 40A is causing any more or less projects. And same with the Hancock Village. The biggest issue, we're at a time where all the people are forced to stay home. They're not comfortable having that construction going on, right outside, their window, as they say. And, they're looking for some sort of relief. You have stated it eloquently. I've stated the same thing, that the governor's order, doesn't allow us to shut the job down. So it's kind of switched to the complaints are coming in. I'm getting photographs of a number of the workers not practicing that social distancing. And that's when I kind of up the ante on our side, and we'll go out there 3 or 4 times a day, and my inspectors will get out of the car. They'll talk to the workers. They'll, talk about social distancing, encourage them to comply, and failure to comply, we'll take some photographs. We'll send it to the construction manager or the project manager, and figure out how to gain compliance. And if we get repetitive non-compliance, we'll take the next step, which would be shutting the job down for a period of time.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. Is there a system in place whereby we would know if there were workers on any any given site that ended up testing positive? If there was any transmission amongst workers, would we even know that?
I don't. That wouldn't be something that would come to me. I could certainly check with Dr. Jett if there's something in Brookline. Are they required to then report it to a local jurisdiction, which would be the health department? I could follow up with him and see. I could maybe put some sort of an email or something out that would suggest that if that does happen in town, that we want to be made aware of it one way or another. But I could work with the fire chief, Dr. Jett, and Mel to figure out how to follow up with that.
Is Dr. Jett on the call? See a line there for him.
I would go a little further and see if it's possible for us to require proactively some sort of testing of those workers who are deemed to be essential and are allowed to continue work on things like construction sites, et cetera. Aggressive testing has been shown to be an important way of controlling this virus in other parts of the world. So if that's possible here, maybe we ought to see if it can be implemented.
I'm not sure about that. What the plan that I adopted is essentially what the state had sent out with their the governor's guidelines last week, and it talks about a self-check, by the employee before he goes onto the site, report to the site supervisor or their supervisor if they have any of the symptoms, related to COVID-19. There are other parameters in place, but testing and masks for all construction workers was not something that was implemented or part of that plan.
Okay.
Dr. Jett, I don't know if you heard that line of questioning, but the specific question was, could we require a contractor or developer to inform us when a worker tests positive with the virus?
Well, not just positive, but indicate or has symptoms. Because if they test positive, I mean, the protocol is that they have to, notify the health department, as I understand.
Yeah, so there is a requirement that they have to notify the health department if they test positive. We would get that notification through Maven if it's if a person resides in Brookline. And we have got different notifications from construction sites before. In terms of testing, there still are not a lot of kits in place. So to require testing, first the person would have to be exposed to somebody that had COVID-19, and then they would have to have symptoms. And right now the priority is to first responders, healthcare workers, public health, etc. I have been notified at different times of people, because I don't get notified of everybody that works in essential services. So that would be something difficult to track down. But if somebody was exposed to somebody on a job site in Brookline and they lived in Brookline, or they were a contact of somebody in Brookline who exposed somebody, we would get the information that way. And so that's another method we could use in terms of tracking what's happening on the site. And, I guess I can talk to Dan later on and see if there's a mechanism, not just construction. We would have to do that for all essential services to be able to notify us if they have something in Brookline. So I will have to look at the regulation on that and, to provide more guidance.
And Dr. Jett, is it fair to say, if whether it be a construction site or business in Brookline, if you or we as a town found that they weren't appropriately complying, or that we thought that it was a particularly unsafe environment, that maybe was more prone to transmission in some way, shape, or form, that we could still take action, that we would take action in that case?
Yes. So if the board or the Board of Health found that somebody was transmitting a contagious virus, we could shut the operation down. And there possibly would be some issues, not just in construction sites, but other essential services, where we find there's a high probability or we suspect that a disease might be spreading. We would have to take action in order to mitigate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does it make sense? What about monitoring people's temperatures at various sites? I mean, is that something that makes sense?
So they should be monitoring people's temperature when they come to work every day, and also in the building as well. And I believe that is in Dan's guidance. And if somebody reports sick, they should call the supervisor and not report to work.
Okay, so temperatures are being monitored. That's good. Any other questions? Thank you.
I have another issue relative to the COVID-19 mitigation.
Okay.
So I did want to report, I know we talked last week about the governor's order. It was fairly new at that time. And also some of the couple of the issues that were still pending. I do want to report that bicycle repair was an issue that was raised last week, and we were successful in convincing the governor to amend his order that would allow bicycle repair stores. I think we only have one along Com Ave in North Brookline, Landry's, but nonetheless, that is an essential activity now, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially in the urban area where bicycling is such an integral part of our transportation system. A couple issues come up every day, really, literally every day, where the governor's order isn't that clear. Just today, we learned about open houses and other activities of realtors showing properties that I think we need to get a handle on, and we're starting to work on that today. But this issue that was raised earlier in the public comment this evening, and we've been hearing more about it, relates to the possibility of shutting down certain roads or parts of roads to accommodate more free access or more safe distancing, I guess, access of walkers and bikers and scooters and so on. So I do think the board, I don't think we're ready for a recommendation at this point in time, but we're interested in the board's policy direction in this area. I would just note that we have to be careful that by expanding areas for recreation, passive recreation, walking, that we're not encouraging it. I think we're at the point in this country and in this state where we're really at the worst possible time, and people really need to stay home. I mean, of course, everyone needs fresh air, and younger people need recreational activities. But I would just say that's a concern that I have, that whatever we do, we don't want to encourage more people to get out and recreate in those venues.
No, I agree that that's a real concern with this proposal. So, any other questions or comments?
Well, I would just add my support for that. It is very important, and kids need to get out, and they need to run, and they need to. But at this time, we have to keep them safe as well, and so I think especially, and we don't want to encourage more people to go to work either. If they're going to go by bicycle, that's great exercise, but we don't want people congregating in workplaces when we're about to enter this period of a rapid increase in number of cases. At least that's the prediction. So, I think it would be wise to encourage people to go to wide open spaces like the golf course or, Amory Park, where it's easier to keep distance between you than crowding in Coolidge Corner. The stores aren't open anyway, so perhaps that's what we could be doing is encouraging people to go to already designated parks that I think don't have many people in them, which is good.
So go ahead, Heather. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I went for a walk today, and the problem that I'm seeing is, in order to get to those wide open spaces, you must use the sidewalk. And the sidewalk just is not big enough to accommodate the number of people that are used to going for walks, but also now want to try to adhere to the social distancing, 6-foot buffer. So I would really like to see a proposal from either our transportation staff, DPW, Parks and Recreation, of what levers we could consider as a board to put in place that would essentially double the amount of space available. Maybe we do signage like we've done in the parks to remind people. Maybe we take some on-street parking away in certain areas that, allow for more space, because I think it's essential to mental health that people get out and try to enjoy this very crazy time.
I'll just echo what Heather is saying. I think we're on the precipice of spring and the nice weather coming. And people are going to come out regardless of what we do, no matter what direction we give. We've been in a span of about a week of rainy, dreary weather, and when the 60s hit the thermometer and the sun comes out, people are going to leave their homes and go for walks, regardless of whether we do or do not provide extra space for pedestrians and cyclists to move up and down our streets. I'm intrigued by taking the action of taking away some curbside parking on some of our more busy thoroughfares like Beacon Street, just to give folks a little bit more room to move around without literally being next to each other. But I am interested to hear what the task force has to say about the safety of taking a step like that, removing curbside parking, and want to make sure that removing curbside parking would not put pedestrians or cyclists in danger by being much closer to traffic, albeit a limited amount of traffic, than they are today when they're on the sidewalk.
They could also, I think, look at the medians in Beacon Street. At least you have those angled parking medians, and if we close those to parking rather than right next to the sidewalk, may have a way of keeping people a little safer.
I'm open to that. It's a real life test of the bridle path that we've been thinking about for the past couple of years. So I'm all for innovative solutions and moving this idea to the way that works best, both practically and from a safety perspective. But I think it's something we should kick the tires on and think about.
I agree with that. I'm all for doing more of a bridle path test. I was a little concerned. I've been a little concerned about sort of the loss of some parking in front of small businesses. We went out of our way to create these 15-minute pickup and drop-off zones, which small business owners really have appreciated. It seems to be working for them. And so I'm hesitant to remove parking along the sidewalk, which would include removing those spots as well. So I think along Beacon Street, something like the bridle path idea is an excellent idea. But again, I'd love to hear, give Todd Grain and the team an opportunity to work this through, like Select Board Member Hamilton mentioned, and see what they come up with.
Sure, we will seek input from staff, and I'm sure you're going to get plenty of it from the public. So we'll tee it up for next week.
Okay.
That's all I had.
Anything else other members of the board have?
Actually, a few people have started to raise the issue that there's a shortage on blood. And so while I have so many of our department heads on the call, just wondering, we don't have to really discuss it in detail tonight, but maybe for next week, talk about whether or not that is something that is within our purview to try to partner with, what that would look like if we tried to partner with an entity that is trying to do blood drives.
I can just speak to tell you that I'm personally trying to donate blood and not having much success. It's the places that I've tried to register are full, and there's a long waiting list. I think it's different for platelets, but definitely would like to try to do that. I think there's one scheduled at the VFW here next week, but it's already fully subscribed. So hopefully, if they have staff and people to do it, I'd love to host it. So I'll pursue that tomorrow.
Thank you, and please keep me in the loop.
Yeah, so I can comment on that because I was asked about the feasibility of it. So it was a 2-week discussion with the VFW and the American Legion, which I am a member of. And my only request was that they had to clean it before and after to the standard, and it wouldn't cost the town anything. So April 7th, I did approve. And so there is another one. Also, I was reached out again by the American Red Cross, and they have found a contract that will clean. I don't see the date that is set for yet, but Lynn Carson on my staff is working on that. So hopefully that will come later on in April as well.
Good. Thank you. Okay, anything else? I guess
Just
that's all.
mention-
I'm sorry.
Let me just mention one thing, which is that I have sort of undertaken a little survey of pharmacies and am interested in how people are accessing their medications without having to go into the pharmacies. And clearly the pharmacies can deliver, and most of them seem to have waived any fees, at least the ones I've talked to, and I haven't spoken to them all, especially if it's the 1 to 2 day kind of thing. So if you're concerned about picking up your medications, you can do it via mail. If you need it immediately, I would urge you to call the pharmacy that you work with and talk to the pharmacist about how you can do it in a safe and way that's comfortable for you. Because they do all have expressed the need to work and the desire to work with people in terms of having them feel safe. So just wanted to mention that while we have an audience.
Great. Thank you. Anything else? I guess that's the end of this meeting. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Support the safety net fund.
And be safe out there.
Yeah.